All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in for the next great edition of the Navigating the Coronavirus Economy series. And I am so thankful to have with us today JD Gershbein, who's a LinkedIn expert. And if it's nice to see you all that are tuning in, a few folks I haven't seen in a while, so it's great to see you. But as we get going on the presentation today, again, my name's Tom Dufour. I'm the CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And this is a session and a series we started here. It's crazy to think about 9 months ago, right as the pandemic had hit, and have been providing weekly bits of information with bringing in experts and professionals to help kind of us facilitate the changing climate that we have now grown accustomed to living in, uh, and what we're doing. And so, as part of that process, JD Gershbein is here today. He's the founder of Owlish Communications and a LinkedIn expert, and was an early adopter in LinkedIn, and someone who is really been a part of this whole LinkedIn wave from the very, very beginning of this, and has a great perspective on it. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity. JD joined us for our podcast here about a month or so ago. So you may have heard him on that. If you haven't, we have him with us live and ready for our session today. So JD, if you wouldn't mind, just give a quick intro about yourself, and we're going to keep this as a more of a discussion type forum on using LinkedIn as a professional in marketing for yourself, for your personal brand, and for your business. So, JD, please go ahead.
Well, thanks, Tom. Good to be back. It just seemed like only a month ago we were taping your podcast. Oh, wait, it
Yeah.
was a month ago. Glad to be back. I never thought my story would be of interest to anyone. Now it's a differentiator for me. I came to LinkedIn very serendipitously back in 2006. I would have never envisioned that I would be in front of groups on stages back in the day when we could go travel and be on stages and do this work to the extent that I've done. A lot of things had to happen for me to have a career, and I'm thankful that they did. And I'm in position today to truly help folks who are compromised in some way by the global pandemic. And I think that narrows it down to all of us at this point. Businesses are scrambling to find some continuity as they advance toward a recovery as we sit here today and have this conversation. So the role of the LinkedIn strategist has really changed. And it's no longer about asserting yourself as the dominant purveyor of knowledge in the field, but it's truly about intersecting with people where they live right now. And very high levels of stress and anxiety, people who postponed or neglected a study of LinkedIn for many years are suddenly reconciled with the fact that they've got to learn this thing to survive. I mean, it's no longer a thing that they do when they have a half hour or an hour to kill during the day. It's something that now has to be seamlessly integrated into the business development efforts of a company or a business. Otherwise, there's just no hope of competing. So I've rearranged my own professional value, and I've taken pages out of my own personal branding playbook, and uh, just addressing people as they pivot right now and asking what the problem is, what's the end game, how they want to flow from point A to point B, and what the role of LinkedIn is in helping them on their journey.
Well, thank you for that overview there, JD. And I think you said that well, that there are a lot of folks that are now on LinkedIn that have maybe had an account for a while and did nothing with it.
Mhm.
And we have folks who maybe have been using it and are saying, how do I kind of get using it to take my profile to that next level, or to maybe even use it as a recruitment strategy for prospects, for business, for networking, and going that direction. So let's start first for someone who's maybe just getting going with it. And maybe if you could share some insights, practical ways of using LinkedIn for someone to get going on that.
Well, we're on LinkedIn to build three things. Now, all the activity that goes on is centered around these three things that we're building. The first is a brand. a personal brand. We're building our brands. This is probably the majority of the speak on LinkedIn these days. Is it is perceived as a personal branding vehicle. So build a brand. The second is to build a network, this vague concept for some people of the online community, which we're getting more intimate with on a daily basis through Zoom and really seeing who the people who inhabit our networks are. So build a brand, build a network, and then the third, which is by far the most challenging piece, is building a business case for yourself. So building a brand, building a network, and building a business case for yourself. Getting known, getting remembered, finding the right people to kind of maneuver around in the online world, and then asserting yourself as the thought leader, the solution provider, the trusted advisor, the innovation, the innovator, or the solutionist.
Mm. Well, JD, you summarize that really, really well. And I'd love for us to talk about each of these three pieces that you
Mhm.
just mentioned and maybe give a little depth to building that brand, uh, building the network, and then making the case for why you should be the go to thought leader, authority, expert, or just whenever someone's in need. So let's start with branding
Mhm.
and what that means and how someone maybe some tips or ideas that people could start using as well, just for some practical ideas in addition to that.
Well, the nature of personal branding, it's been around for a while, certainly since the social media revolution, when we started to really picture ourselves in these environments. I think you talk to anybody before the internet really came into vogue. Branding was something that was restricted for huge companies that had 8 or 9 figure advertising budgets who were advertising during the Super Bowl. These were brands. These were people who commanded the brandscape, so to speak. But what social media did was it leveled the playing field, and it gave everybody, the common folk, a chance to build the brand in a very powerful way, almost as effective as the big players were doing. And as social media has become so pervasive, in fact, you could technically drop social from the term. It's media. I mean, we probably get more news that we feel we can use from these platforms than on the traditional media outlets these days. So personal branding became a way of imposing our will on the system, what we did, how we showed up in our profiles, how we engaged on the site, what we posted as authors, what we wanted to take people to off LinkedIn. So if there was a website, a landing page, an Amazon author page, whatever the end game that we envisioned for ourselves, that's how we wanted to be associated. And the more we did this and tinkered with our profiles, the more we got recognized, acknowledged, and ideally connected with. So that brand piece started to really, I would say, gain momentum around 2010 when LinkedIn started to enjoy some of its growth. And then following year in 2011, when it topped 100 million users, which was a huge milestone, then we really started to see a lot more about the craft of personal branding come into play. I've been around it my whole marketing career. I probably didn't speak of it in terms of personal branding till the time I became a LinkedIn strategist. But now it's what dominates me. It's the value that I underscore for my clients who truly want to stand out. For them, mediocrity is not an option. They truly want to be known for the product they sell, the services they provide, the companies they work for, the skills they command, and the niche that they're trying to drive.
Interesting. And JD, for this building of the personal brand, what does this look like? If I've got a profile, I've had one for maybe a few years, I've got maybe a couple hundred, network of maybe a few hundred or so.
Mhm.
What could I do maybe in my profile or business, and really from two facets, because our audience will be the owner, the business owner, an entrepreneur that's selling their product or service that they're looking to sell, and then also our folks that are in the franchising business that are now also selling franchises, or maybe a vendor to franchises, or maybe a franchise broker. So, uh, would you mind talking a little bit about some of those perspectives there?
Sure. Well, as the field of LinkedIn strategy has evolved, more and more people are now writing profiles, which is a core service of mine. So the LinkedIn profile, without question, has become our most prized digital asset. It's our first point of reference in the universe, and the impression we leave to the visitors of our page will have far-reaching implications in whether they will do business with us or not, whether they will connect with us or not. So what are we putting out there? And it's not so much about tips or what I think you should do, because by now we're starting to see more and more people develop their own take on LinkedIn, which I think is the desired effect. But to truly position yourself for the opportunities that you seek is the key. That could come out of the first person or the third person narrative. I happen to favor a third person. That I think is what sells my clients a lot better. I think it's what sells me a lot better, because I work with a lot of very decorated, accomplished people. And when you start talking about yourself and all the cool things you've done in first person, it sounds a little arrogant or bloated. And I think the third person narrative disarms you a little bit. And because LinkedIn profile writing is such an outsourced service right now, it too has become somewhat commoditized. So you have to separate out and go with the true technicians if you're going to have your profile outsourced, who really excel at capturing you and getting the story. And story is the key word, Tom. You want to tell your story. A LinkedIn profile should not be an overt sales pitch. It should definitely allude to the client's pain and perhaps your ideal client profile, but it should not be an artificial evaluation of your capabilities. It should really ground you, center you, and in it you should come off as being very real, uh, humble, authentic, humanized.
Hmm. So, and I think you're right. I mean, anyone who spent any
I hope
time
I'm
on,
right.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm just thinking back to my own usage of LinkedIn, and just,
Mhm.
you can tell by those profiles where it sounds too, yeah, salesy or self promotion kind of a deal. So, trying to walk that balance of telling your story without coming across too strongly. Um, well, how about the network here? You mentioned the network and building the network. So, you know, do I just go through, LinkedIn has suggestions. Do I just start going through and invite connections to everyone? Do I use it for prospecting? Do I upgrade my status to maybe the LinkedIn, sales navigator, or what, all the different versions that that are offered? Maybe talk through that network building and how to go through that.
That truly is a loaded question, and the network is all encompassing, and many people will tell you that is the sine qua non of LinkedIn, is how we're assembling this online community, because as we're building it, we should be doing something to manage and leverage it. Far too often, and it's still a pervasive thing today, users are connecting with other users for sport, as if getting the most connections will win them some merit badge. And truly, the quality versus quantity argument, which comes into play with pretty much everything in life, let alone LinkedIn, you want quality connections. You want to surround yourself with people who are aligned with you in some manner. Don't just connect with people to have them in there to sell to, because there's no selling on LinkedIn. So the network, which I believe should be built from your organic experience, people that you know well. LinkedIn had a disclaimer for many years. You can still find it somewhere, even in their terms of service, that says you should connect with people you know and know well. Well, if we all did that, we'd have very small networks, because many people don't know thousands of people very well. So we've kind of done what LinkedIn has asked us to do. Maybe we've tinkered the profile a little bit, but now we're just going out there, inviting people, accepting invitations, taking people into our network and us into theirs. And okay, what next, folks? Is it going to end there? Is the relationship going to get built, or is it going to die on the vine? And the difference between people who are using LinkedIn effectively and people who are kind of stagnating on the site is proactive nature. And if you're not proactive in communicating with people with whom you've just connected, whether you send the invite or you accept theirs, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to ghost each other. You're going to go dark. And you're going to wonder in 2 or 3 weeks when you see their name on your directory of connections, why you connected with them in the first place. So I subscribe to the notion of always be leveraging. You can't leverage what you can't manage, and you have to know who's in your network. You have to have some contact with them. You have to stage written communications, because that's all we have to go on right now, 9.5 months into a pandemic with no hope in sight. We can't meet everybody for coffee. Not everybody's going to be our economic buyers. So what is the value that we assess to all of these people who reside in our network? We have to find some way of categorizing them. Certain people emerge as buyers, as strategic partners, as connectors, people who can get us to more economic buyers, and other people will just become our professional friends. They'll never buy. You can't count on them to share content. Is there a value to having them in your network? Question mark. I don't know, and I don't think so.
Well, so JD, one of the things that I know in my use of using LinkedIn, every once in a while, as part of my networking, when I'm reaching out to someone, I'll say something to the effect of, hey, great seeing you on LinkedIn. It looks like we may have some connections in common. Would it be able to connect? And so that's one way that I approach it. And I've had others come to me and say, hey, Tom, I see you're connected to so-and-so. Would you mind connecting the two of us in a connecting email or an introduction? What's your approach or what's your take on those approaches and maybe alternative strategies?
Well, 9.5 months into a pandemic, I think we are starting to see real social networking happen. And I think that's the next great step for a lot of people, because they never did this stuff before. They connected. And again, they just let people veer off into radio silence. And now we're kind of going back to who we've brought into our network, and we're engaging with them on one-on-one Zoom calls, or we're maneuvering into various online communities and seeing people we know, and maybe even spur recognition. Oh, you and I are first degree connections on LinkedIn. Well, for most people, it would stop from that acknowledgement, but truly opportunistic folks on LinkedIn are now developing relationships. So the next great piece of the social networking strategy, and it's not really strategic when you think of it, is just being a human being and approach each other from the place of altruism and service and collaboration, and not trying to sell anybody anything, and just working on getting each other through this pandemic. Because if you're truly interested in helping people and serving people, and anybody in business should be, you have to approach them right now, not from a place of trying to sell them something. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to be thought of as someone else's lead right now.
Right.
So I think we should throw away the term lead generation. We really should work on establishing relationships and almost putting sales secondary. Because if you're going to sell something, you have to sell yourself first, right? We all know this. This is what the new classical sales training is. It's work on the relationship, appeal to the intellect and emotion of the buyer. Well, we're always appealing to the emotion and intellect of the buyer, but the buyer just happens to be a first degree connection, or someone who might be willing to introduce you to their network. So you're always on, you're always auditioning, you're always trying to show up strong, right? That's what we're trying to do on these online Zoom calls.
Yeah.
So don't be burdened by Zoom fatigue. Toughen up, people, because it's just starting.
Great. Well, great. And JD, we had a question come in. Florence, do you want to unmute yourself there and ask your question?
Florence?
All right. Yep. I'm getting there. Hold on. I'm getting there. Okay. I'm unmuted. So actually, I came up with another question. So a couple of two questions on connections. First question is I guess we're all franchises, right? So I heard Susan was shaking their head. So I'm a franchise. So I have a business that offers a service to consumers. So my branding is based on what I'm offering to my consumers, but I'm looking for franchisees to buy into my franchise, which is most likely going to come. Well, actually, I'll give you a thank you. Our last franchise we sold a couple months ago came to us from LinkedIn.
Well, I had nothing to do with it, but you're welcome.
She found us. She found us through LinkedIn. We're not sure how she found us, and she's not sure how.
Such is the power of LinkedIn, Florence. Don't argue with it. Just roll with it.
Yeah.
And I did not plant this. We did not plant this, folks. This is very organic. It's natural. So that's great, Florence. Thanks for sharing that. That's amazing.
Yeah, but the question is how do we get more like her? She's an excellent franchisee, but she doesn't know how she found us, and we don't know what we did to find her. So it was serendipitous in a way. So we got to figure that one out. So the question related to that would be, do you put more energy into your brand for the person who's trying to find you as a franchisee, or do you put more energy into your branding, your company, on what you actually do as a service? That's question number one.
All right. Well, you can only go so far in putting your brand out there in any level, in any capacity, because so much lies outside your control. The very best role that you can provide is to be the best steward of your story. Whatever that story is, whatever that product or service is, your product is a franchise. You are selling an opportunity. Okay. It's an intangible for many people, because we're hearing more about franchising opportunities, especially for people who have left the corporate world. They're looking at franchise opportunities and becoming their own boss and becoming business owners. It's a ticket to entrepreneurialism. And it's a very demanding profession to be a franchise right now. There's a lot of things coming at franchisees right now. Yeah. They're very busy people, and yes, they're trying to recruit. So
I guess the answer to my question would be put more energy into building my company up to look like an appealing opportunity for somebody, for the franchisee versus the actual user of our service.
Right from the point of view of the opportunity, if you're on LinkedIn to develop franchisees, well, you should certainly have the strength of the solution that of what the enterprise provides. But you're selling the opportunity, you're selling autonomy, you're selling freedom, you're selling entrepreneurialism. And those are conversations that ideally you want to have with people who are sick of working for the man and they want to be their own boss. So these are great conversations to have.
So when you do a post, so we do Facebook and we do blogs, and we have our whole social media plan. And when we're doing a LinkedIn post, like right now, I pretty much just share our newsletter on LinkedIn and a little bit of franchise information. But when you're doing a post on LinkedIn, is it going out to everyone, or is it just going out to my followers? And so I have followers as an individual and I have followers as a business. Where are my posts going, or are they going out to everybody? Can anybody find them?
That's a great question, because there's a certain message in a bottle feeling vibe to some of the content we put out there. We don't know where it's going. If you're connected with 1,000 people, I will tell you that 1,000 people will not see it. Those 1,000 will not see it. You're going to meet what's called the LinkedIn algorithm head on, and that is a mystic force that is going to direct this content into all sorts of directions. And ideally, if people do see it in their feed, which is where they will see it, they better act quickly on it, because if they don't, if they refresh their screen, they're liable, or if they scroll past it and walk away, they may not get back to it. Right. So the question is, I wouldn't be hung up on likes, because those are vanity metrics. I wouldn't be hung up on the number of views. Again, vanity metrics. I would be hung up on who's engaging on your post, and are you going to come back, respond to the person who's engaging with you, and be in a position to convert that into a meaningful off LinkedIn conversation.
Okay, so now back to the question I posed to Tom. So what happens so like I said, I have my personal profile, and then we have our business.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when we get people following our business we don't want following our business? We're just stuck with them as followers.
Learn to live with them, Florence.
Can't get rid of them.
Learn to live with them. Maybe they'll throw you a bone and do you a solid and share your content sometime.
Yeah, well, most likely they're spies. So
Ah.
they're following you because they,
You cannot conceal your company page.
All right. So anybody can follow it. You can't ever unfollow someone.
Hence the company page, because that is set up like so many things on LinkedIn from a recruiting point of view. There are people whose sole strategy on LinkedIn is to network into companies.
Mm-hmm.
And LinkedIn makes those companies accessible to follow.
All right. All right. That's it for my questions at the moment. I'll think of some more.
Well, that's great, Florence. Great to see you. So it's an interesting point that Florence was bringing up there, JD. So can we talk a little bit about the personal? We've talked a lot about your personal page. What about the business page? Florence, thanks for bringing that up, because, that's its own thing too. So how does that interplay with your personal, especially for a small business? Sometimes as the small business owner, you are the person and the business all at the same time. When people think of the business, they think of you. So how, do you have any suggestions, strategies on how to manage that business page?
There's not a whole lot to do regarding managing the business page. It's very strategic. So creating the company page, giving the company a presence on the site is important, but I'll underscore that with the notion that LinkedIn is a personal platform, an individual marketing platform. So now we're talking about how do we leverage the company presence. Company can put out content. Company has a voice on LinkedIn, and each employee of the company or each brand ambassador that the company can recruit should be sharing that content through their personal profiles. So company puts out a post. Ideally, the people who will see it are the people who are following the company. It will make it to their homepage feed, but whether or not they're on their computer at the time it hits is a different story. After a few scrolls, it may be buffered out because there's so much content coming in from above to displace it. If they don't see it, they may not see it. But at the same time, you mobilize ambassadors to help you share this content. And these could be your employees. They could be strategic partners of the company. They could be friends of the firm. They could be your professional good deed doers who will say, I will definitely like this for you. And you gain coverage within their networks. So as you engage on a company post, it's ideally going to get more coverage within the ecosystem, more exposure. And you just keep coming back and repurposing company content. It should be done on a daily basis.
Interesting. So that's an interesting strategy. So if you post something on your personal page and maybe you also then post it on your business page, your team members, if you've got employees, as you mentioned, brand ambassadors, maybe even the other franchisees in your network, if it's something coming from the CEO and coming from the business page, your network, your franchisees, your employees should be taking that and reposting it to their.
You should tag people on it. You should tag the employees, but also the company should produce what's called evergreen content. So it shouldn't be something that may be ephemeral in nature, where after a day or two, it's no longer news. It should be content about the company that would be just as relevant, say, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, as it is right now. And these posts can be used as internal links in direct messages to acquaint people with the company, because every employee of the franchise or the business, the enterprise, is now tasked with growing the company following. And the more company followers you get, the greater, again, the visibility within the home pages of those followers, and the greater the likelihood that they may like, comment, or share a post when it comes down the pike.
Interesting. So what about this evergreen content then? Do you have an example of something that might be a reference point? Florence here had mentioned her newsletters and sharing those newsletters. And I would imagine that I mean, I've followed her newsletters. I just know because I get her monthly newsletters, and a lot of some of the information is pertinent to right now, but some of it could just be information that could go whenever. I mean, it's applicable all the time. So how could maybe someone like Florence, how could she use some of that material and create evergreen out of that?
Well, evergreen content is basically like the evergreen tree. It's something that it's always standing, always topical, always relevant, and it requires an evaluation. You have to literally read what you're posting and say, is this relevant today? Will people get anything out of it? If not, you could update it, you could repurpose it, and you could recycle it. Posts ideally have what's called residual marketing capability, which means you could put them out again and again, as long as you tune them up for today's eyes and ears and mindset. So it supplements what you're doing on the personal level by bringing in this company content, because now each post in this portfolio of content becomes its own marketing piece.
Interesting. And what about the third piece? Well, I'd like to talk through that a little bit. You mentioned 3 items here with the brand, the network, and then making the case for yourself.
Building the business case for yourself, Tom.
Yeah. So
how on earth do we do that, huh?
Yeah. So I feel like we're kind of walking our way there with some of the discussion points here, but let's go a little direct and get right to it.
That comes down to messaging. And there's all sorts of ways to deal with messaging. And messaging is pervasive on LinkedIn. It starts at the level of your LinkedIn profile. It kind of bleeds through to the interactive space on LinkedIn, and it comes back to you in what I call direct messaging, or M2M communication, mind to mind communication, because that's the filter down. That's where you want to get to. You want to have meaningful one-on-one conversations with people, whether they're going to be buyers, whether they're going to be connectors, whether they're going to be strategic alliances. The whole end game of all of this is to generate one-on-one conversations. And that's where you make the so-called business case for yourself. You justify the connection that someone made with you. You start to amplify their work. You start to interview them as potential buyers of your product or service, or you just have conversation that may be bookmarked for a later date that could lead to something. Again, collaborating, joint venture discussions, things like that. When you're strictly selling a product or service, people will recognize it soon enough that you're just trying to get them into your funnel and you're not really building a business case. But again, establishing trust and rapport, staging communications sequentially, so you really look like a noble human being here that's just not out for a sale or to bring someone into your funnel.
We've got another question here. Go ahead, Florence.
It's me again. Okay, so I'm going back a ways when Tom asked about when LinkedIn sends you these invites, you might want to connect with this person, that person, and so forth. And you don't really know them. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that maybe you should connect with them, maybe you shouldn't, because you want quality versus quantity, but reaching out to them through a message might be a good first step.
I've done that. I do that from time to time. I write InMails. I'm a paid LinkedIn user, so I get InMails, which are targeted pieces of communication that I can send to anyone, or anyone who I'm not directly connected with. And these are engineered to deliver a higher rate of response. And yes, Florence, to your point, I will occasionally, if this is someone that I've attached significance to and really want to connect with them, I will ask for permission to connect through that InMail. And that's, for many people, unprecedented on LinkedIn, because they just don't see that. They're used to bad actors trying to sell them something at every turn. So by approaching people with courtesy and respect, it shows that you're willing to connect for the right reasons. You will precondition them for a sales conversation. You've earned the right to talk about what you do and how it may or may not involve them. So again, there's no shortage for just doing the right thing on LinkedIn. And so many people are shot down because they don't know better. and they're not building a business case with themselves by inviting you to connect and putting a sales pitch right there in the invitation.
Okay. Thank you.
So the building of the business case is every day in every way, guys. It's every message you send, it's every post you put up, it's every tweak you make to your LinkedIn profile, it's how you opt to lay a comment on, or share the work of others. It's about how you comport yourself in the LinkedIn space, because you can drive a deep and wide footprint on the site, but if you're not appealing to the sensibilities or the intellect or the emotion of people, it's hard to register. You can't make a business case for yourself. But if you support people and you lift their spirits as you would have yours lifted, you begin to take up greater real estate in the mind, that achieving top of mindedness we call, and you start to be remembered for who you are and what you do.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, JD, while we have you here, I'd like to see if we have other questions from anyone that's tuning in here, and just, have this as an open discussion here. So are there additional questions, comments, thoughts that you'd like to ask or run by JD while we have him here to the audience?
Free consulting, folks. Get me while I'm cheap. Anybody out there in live Facebook land? Are you hearing from anybody there? Or is it just a desolate wasteland with tumbleweeds rolling across the plain? And
let me see.
All right, I'll keep asking questions.
Go for it.
So in third, and I'm not a writer, I'm an artist. So writing
all right
things. So by third person, that means that first person is when you're talking about yourself. Third person is when someone's talking about you.
Right. First person pronouns are I, me, mine. So the profile is coming out of first person. It's coming out from your perspective. You're bringing in your own evaluations and judgments about yourself, which tend to bleed into arrogance and pomposity. And I mean, you can stretch the reality of your situation, but you're going to sound quite inflated when you do that. Third person, I favor a rich third person omniscient narrative, which are judgments and evaluations made by an all-knowing narrator. So you are he, she, his, hers, and those are the pronouns that the profile takes on.
Okay.
And there's a lot going on now in the pronouncing space right now.
So I tend to be a very modest person. I don't really like to say a lot about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of that does somebody really have to do? Can I say more about my business or more about other things?
Interesting, because we're encouraged to be storytellers these days. And I think that really good marketing comes from that place of storytelling. Storytelling is the new marketing. And the more you're willing to share about yourself personally / professionally, and maybe at the expense of some company, because you are the company. If you're a sole proprietorship, you are the company. Mm-hmm. You're the entrepreneur. You're the moving part. You're the face of the firm, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It should reflect on you and the blood, sweat, tears you've put into building the brand.
But you just did said a key word there. It's about storytelling.
Yes.
To tell more stories about what you actually do and what you've accomplished from helping people, right? And leave less out of it and more out of the circumstance or what you actually do, right?
Well, by storytelling is kind of like a modality at this point. It's also a coachable skill in the eyes of many people. And we're encouraged to be able to tell our stories well, because when we tell our stories well, we sell our stories well. And we have to live out those stories in front of a community. So everything has to be congruent. If what you're saying about yourself matches what you're saying about yourself in your LinkedIn profile, you will achieve congruence in the minds of others. If you're telling a different story, or if you're not willing to go beyond the sales pitch language in your profile, it's going to create a disconnect. It's dissonant language, and the brain will recognize that and be uncomfortable with it, because we're so used to hearing people sell.
Yeah, well, we're not a very high pressure sales franchise either. We don't actually aggressively go after anybody. We wait for people to come to us. So it's slightly different in general.
Well, more and more major brands, and you see this on network television, you see more and more companies opening up and sharing their story. If they're closely held family businesses, somewhere along the line, it started in someone's basement, and they're bringing that into the story. They're bringing the fact that they used to deliver their goods on horse and buggy. So, I mean, you know, how we roll as a brand, as a family, as an enterprise, there's a story to it. How much of it we choose to share, personal taste.
Yeah, and Florence, I might suggest too. I know your story. You've got a great story, and you've got a great lifestyle business. So, you know, as you're thinking about what you're doing and going through it, you could talk about how you built the business to fit a stage of life you were in when you started the company and how it evolved. And you could talk about the customers that you've helped along the way and how it impacted their home or their life or their business. And you could talk about the current franchisees in the system, how they were, whatever they were doing beforehand, and now they're doing, now they're part of your franchise system, and it's given them the freedom or the lifestyle that they were searching for. And maybe it's an interview with them. Maybe they do, maybe it's something, you know, they're
Froze.
Oh, it's so tragic when that happens, isn't it, gang? It's, you know, when the technology fails, there's nothing we can do. That shows us how helpless we are against it. And we're trying our best. We're trying our best to reclaim Tom. Tom has vanished, which has put me into the very familiar role of facilitator.
Yeah, he's frozen on the screen.
So I'll facilitate until Tom makes a miraculous comeback. But let me ask what you're experiencing. What are some of the things that make you guys angry as LinkedIn users? What is offensive and intrusive about it for you? What don't you like?
I just don't like when you connect with someone and you get those messages that are immediate sales pitch. Those are the big turnoffs. They don't want to make a meeting. It's immediately this, you know, that's, you know, this is what I, you know, buy. It's not even this is what I do, like telling me information. It's buy this, buy that, buy this. Those people I've blocked.
Yes.
I will accept pretty much anybody if it looks legit. If the site looks legit because they're interested for some reason. Now, maybe they want to sell their stuff, and if it becomes obnoxious, then I'll get rid of it. But if it looks legit, I would accept those people.
Well, again, you go back to the bad actors out there, and the most egregious breach of ethics of all is selling someone something on the invitation to connect on LinkedIn, or coming back after the invitation is accepted with an even more aggressive sales pitch. It ain't right, and it's not a LinkedIn problem. It's a LinkedIn user problem, and it requires education. I'm convinced that these people just don't know better. And if they don't know better, they're going to make mistakes. And I use them sometimes as teaching moments. In my hard drive, I have 50 or so really bad examples of LinkedIn invitations that really just ruffled my feathers, that frosted my chaps, so to speak. And I report these people to LinkedIn. And if enough people do report them, they'll get their accounts suspended or restricted. And you know what? Good for them, because what they're doing is a violation of LinkedIn's terms of service. If you want to do some interesting reading someday, pull up LinkedIn's terms of service. Read what they have to say about their platform, because you'll see a lot of violations.
David, I wanted to ask you something though. 2 questions. So what about redundancy? You have your personal page and you have the business page. Let's say you have a video, you want to show a video. It's not like an article where you might be able to recycle the article at the moment. You have a video you want to show. Do you wait to do it? You want to show, and you have more people on your personal, but you want to build up your professional. How do you tackle that?
Well, you post it on both. The question is when and how do you post them on both? So If it's truly a company piece, it should be posted company, and then you can post it. Ideally, it'll go out to your followers. Followers will see it, maybe like it, maybe be inclined to lay a comment on it. And then you too, as a personal account, can go to the company post you just made, find it and like it, which will give you coverage. But then you could come back, say, a few days later, or maybe a week later, and repost purely from the personal account.
Oh, okay. You shouldn't share it from your personal page.
You should not share it because you'll lose the engagement.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, sharing is the least desirable way to get your content out there.
Sharing is the least desirable. What about sharing other people's content? What are your thoughts about that?
Again, sharing it is the mechanism of sharing. So you're actually grabbing that link and you're posting it as your own. The click that's going to get the most coverage for the person posting or authoring that post is the like, surprisingly. Just by liking it, it's going to get a lot of visibility through your network. When you lay a comment on it, you're really doing that person a solid, because then they're going to have algorithmic treatment, favorable algorithmic treatment that'll get that post propelled through the ecosystem.
Yeah, comments are really important. You definitely should do comments.
Especially early. If you can get, say, a half a dozen comments in the first half hour of the life of a post, it'll take on some legs. It'll get out there. And that's tough sometimes, because it goes longer. Sometimes it takes a longer time to buffer. And if you release a post too early or at an off time, nobody's going to really see it.
What about, that's a good point. What about timing? What are your thoughts about timing?
I've posted at all times of the day. There's no rhyme or reason. They will tell you that if you post, say, on a Monday morning or a Thursday morning, you'll get some great play on a given post. But put yourself in the position of everybody else. Monday morning, that's a catch-up day for a lot of people, and your post could be missed simply because people are just trying to get their week in order and answering emails, or maybe they unplugged for the weekend. Hard to believe with digital people these days, but they're coming in Monday and they take that hour or two in the morning to just do their own stuff. Monday later in the day is good. I've posted Monday afternoon. That's maybe after local lunchtime for me, which is Central Time, and I seem to get some good play on posts. And also middle of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're all good. Some people say that Wednesday is a great time to post. Thursday, great time to post. And we're in a global pandemic right now. It's hard to say. You've got a lot of users on at any given time, even weekends.
Got you. So one more, thank you. I love all your information. That's why I'm back to see you. So what about the hashtag? So I understand, I've been told that LinkedIn is not Instagram, and if you put too many hashtags, you're going to actually take away from your post and be penalized, and that 3 to 4 are the right amount. Do you agree with that? Is that true, and why?
Well, I don't know if I would say the right question is, do I agree with it? I've heard much of the same. I've heard that 3 to 5 hashtags maximum.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that if you put 20 hashtags on there that LinkedIn is going to say, whoa, this person's trying to game the system, and they will restrict your post. But I also think that there's something to be said for people who are very focused on the audience they want that post to hit. So if you can pick out 3, and they're what I would call, maybe 2 of them are broad-based with 1 specific, I think you're good to go on that. Great hashtags in my field are entrepreneur is a great hashtag, success is a great hashtag, and for franchisees, you should definitely include those. Leadership, business opportunities, business development, things like that. I think those are great hashtags to put an opportunity in. Jobs, another great one. I mean, probably that could be one of the most popular, but yet underutilized hashtags is jobs. It's not just for recruiters and candidates. It's for anybody with an experience to offer.
Great, thank you. Thank you for answering all my questions. I appreciate it.
Great questions, Nancy. Thank you. And Florence, I see your hands up there. You got a question?
Florence, you got to start busting out of your shell.
I
You've
have
been way too quiet during this program.
Yeah, I always have lots of questions. So going back to what I mentioned before is what I normally do, which is we don't do it a lot, but I share the newsletter and also the blogs on LinkedIn. And I usually just share the link to the blog and the link to their links. Is it better to actually share the content like the blog? Would I be better off cutting and pasting the content and putting the blog content up as content, or leaving it as a link to the blog?
Well, a combination of both, because anytime you're moving people off LinkedIn, you are not going to receive favorable treatment from the LinkedIn algorithm. LinkedIn operates to keep people on its site.
Okay.
That is the sole goal of LinkedIn. They want to keep you on their site as long as possible. So if you are redirecting them or hijacking them to your blog of awesomeness, which is of course where you want them to go, there's a better way to do that.
Okay.
You do not put the link in the post. What the convention has become is you put a featured image that applies to your post. You talk about the post in the post, the blog in the post, but then once you publish, you come back and in the first comment, you put the link to the post that you want them to go off LinkedIn. And you go back and edit your post and say, link to the post in the first comment below.
Oh.
That way, to a certain point, you skirt the LinkedIn algorithm.
Yeah,
and you have.
So the algorithm reads it the minute you post it, but it doesn't go back and reread it once you edit it?
Well, it may, but you'll get a lot more coverage and a lot more people seeing it if you do it that way. And that's what you see people doing. Link in the first comment below. So after it publishes, let it buffer a little while. Don't go right back at it. Wait about maybe a minute, come back, and then put the link to that post in the first comment. Here's the URL to the piece, or for the full piece, please visit. And don't say things like check out my latest blog, or try to create some kind of sizzle and get readers there. Create a problem, create a question around it.
Well, what about putting in let's say I have a blog and I take the image from the blog, put it in there, and maybe put the first paragraph of the blog in as content, and then say read the rest, go to the blog to read the rest.
You could, but again, it's gonna meet with a little bit of indifference, because you want to sell readership, right? You want to get people to your blog. You're going to have to entice them. In many cases, the first paragraph of a blog isn't enough to do it. Create the problem, create the urgency, and answer the question, why should I read this? If you can answer the question, why should I read this? You'll get more people there reading it.
Yeah, but
there's got to be some pain point.
We sort of have a fluff business, some people would say.
Well, if you want to showcase your writing, you're going to have to get people to the writing.
All right.
Yeah, and Florence, to couple on that, I would say that there's only a certain audience that's going to be attracted to it anyway. So a lot of folks who are going to see it, they will fluff it off. They're not going to read it, but you don't care about them. At least for that message, at that moment in time, for that message, you have a target audience that you're going to, and some people, that target audience might be in one post. It might be for a do-it-yourself or a home improver that's going to read some of the content from your blog. And another post, it might be a potential franchisee that you're kind of targeting about lifestyle and building a business and so on. And then the next post might be for getting someone to hire you for your service, to come in and help them with their color selection. So anyway, just to kind of help put it in some different terms, that all three of those could be a different audience. It could be the same person at the same time. Probably unlikely. It's more likely that each one of those posts would have a different audience. It would have a different target each time. So, so I would just be mindful to that every message you post out there, there's no way it's going to be 100% follow there. So, well, as we're nearing the close here of the session, JD, how can people get a hold of you to continue these great conversations? Maybe seek some professional advice and work with you if they so choose.
Do people really want to seek me out? Do you think that's really the case?
Yeah,
Or
I
they're
do.
just happy with their free knowledge today, Tom?
I think both. I think
All
both.
right. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. You know, the interesting thing is we can communicate to our audience here. You and I go way back. I really met you at
Yes.
the start of my LinkedIn corporate training career at a time when I
Yes.
was really, it was like a guided tour of Chicago business for me. I was going from conference room to conference room, lunch and learns to half-day workshops, and it was a great time. And you were part of a
Yeah.
company that sought me out for training, and we stuck, we stayed connected, and
Yes.
here I am.
Yeah.
So I'm here. I'm living testimonial to the fact that relationship building works. I'm searchable under LinkedIn. You can see my name. You can plug that into a search engine on LinkedIn. You will find me. Look for JD, and then look for the last name Gershbein. I'm there. And I'm happy to engage with anybody who wants to take the conversation a step further with me. But I love talking about this stuff. It's no pretense with me. I move people forward on LinkedIn just by listening to them and maybe offering a hint or two. I'm not really a tips, techniques, and secrets guy. I think that's kind of oversaturated in any industry right now. But I'm a guy that I know a lot of people like to plug into. I'm going to tell you what's real. I'm going to tell you what works and what doesn't. And I think that's what we want now. We don't want bloated promises. We don't want to hear that it's sugar coated in any way. The reality is, it's not something that's going to work itself. It requires ongoing effort and vigilance and stick-to-itness and critical thinking and focus. And that's what moves the needle.
Well, JD, I really appreciate you being here. And you're right. I should have said early on to everyone here, JD and I have known one another for, I guess, probably about 10 years. It's been somewhere
At
around
least,
there,
yeah, it
at
has to
least
be.
10 years. And yeah, actually, you're right. It's definitely longer than that because, yes, it is.
Oh, another
Definitely.
freeze.
I'm like
Oh, there
thinking
he
about the
is.
age of my kids. I'm like, oh, yeah, no, it's definitely longer than that.
Well, we're trying so hard to get through this outro, aren't we, ladies and listeners?
And
I know he's going to come back. I just know it. Come on, Tom. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you to come back and close the show with style, with grace. You're going to make me close the show, I think. I'm going to have to take over for Tom right now. No, there he is.
hey,
The
my
technical
Zoom
difficulties.
the Zoom platform keeps crashing on me. It's the second time it's done it. So anyway,
I was getting ready to close the show for you, my friend.
Well, thank you. We'll include this will be rebroadcast. We'll have this available by Monday. It'll be on our website, and we'll also publish it on YouTube. And we will share this with everyone, and including JD's contact info. So JD, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for attending. This will be our last live webinar of the year. So if we will see you in 2021, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all.
And to all a good night.
And thank you for here.